This is episode 28 of Standing Out. Standing Out is a remarkable interview-style podcast with the intention to highlight women and men making outstanding contributions in their field. This podcast is generously sponsored by Think Global. Think Global is a business advisory firm working with women entrepreneurs around the globe to scale their businesses to the next level. Today, I'd like to welcome Naveen Khan. Naveen is the CEO of Patient Pal. PT Pal is the first of its kind approach to connect surgeons, therapists, and patients through a collaborative portal focused on follow-up treatments and outcomes. She has a background in law and sociology and worked at a global investment firm in tech and in business. Her passion is in inventing better ways of doing things. Naveen, welcome. Thanks for being here.
Thank you, Katrina. Hi. It's good to be here. Thanks for having me.
Of course. So I would like to start. So we're most definitely going to get into Patient Pal, but I would like to start with how you got your start as an entrepreneur. Have you always been an entrepreneur, or is this your first endeavor?
It is my first on my own, but I've always been. It's been a long road to just making things. Like, I love making things and making things better and just inventing things. And so I've always been doing that. And then I just got to a point where it was just the right time, and I had the right skills to do it on my own. Before this, I was at a startup where I was a COO, but that was someone else who founded it. This is the first one that I founded.
Interesting. For that company, what type of company was it? Is it a tech startup?
It was tech, and it was in the auto industry. So it was a parts bidding platform.
Oh, interesting. So as you're doing that, did you get this idea as you were working at the other startup, or did it come after you left?
No, it came after I left because I had a medical issue. I had a bone marrow biopsy, and the doctor slipped while he was doing the biopsy and hurt my back, and I had to go for physical therapy.
Okay.
Every time I went, I'd get paper or oral instructions, and it wasn't effective. And so that's where it sort of began. And from there, I created the app just for myself, telling that it told me what to do, when to do it, how to do it, and tracked what I did and when I did it.
So this is interesting because I, like you, so our son, who's 7, was recently diagnosed with asthma, and I can't tell you how many pieces of paper we got regarding how to give the treatment, foods to stay away from, exercise, and like, I'm not reading all of that is how I felt. And then it's also kind of like just the stack of paper that's sitting there where I'm like, okay, of course I want to help my son get through this. Luckily or unluckily, my husband also has asthma, so we have quite a bit of experience with it, where I felt like, all right, maybe shortcut here or there. But one thing I have noticed too is that I do my best to give him his treatments, but it's also sort of like a learning curve for me to kind of get into those routines too. And so this is really recent, in the last 2 or 3 weeks. So there have been days where I'm laying in bed and he's sleeping. I'm like, oh, I forgot,
Yeah.
because I'm not quite there yet. I'm trying. So
yeah,
that's really interesting.
Yeah, it's exactly that brought me here. People they're sent home to do this really quite technical work. And people are just lay people that don't necessarily have that education and everyone needs reminders. I mean, when you go to school, you get homework and you have a reminder and a deadline to have it back in. And it's the same thing. You need to have those reminders, and you need to have that education, but you need to have it accessible. About 90% of people leave clinics and adults and don't know what they're doing when they get home, because they've forgotten what they were told, and they don't know what to do when they get home because it's technical.
Right. And it all makes sense in the moment when someone's explaining. It's just, it is technical, and then you get home and regular life happens too, to where you just kind of forget.
And it's the most important thing. in your life, your health. And if you
Right.
don't have that, and if you're not focused on getting better, and most of that healthcare happens outside of the clinic.
Interesting. So, okay, so you're, is this an app, right?
It's an app for the patient, and then it's a web portal and system for the clinician to prescribe to the patient. So we went from physical therapy and we went into health systems, and the occupational therapists were like, oh, we really need this. And the speech therapists were like, we really need this.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, and then patients were getting all these instructions from various places and different kinds of instructions, and they wanted it all in one place. So it became this platform for a care plan. And then now we deal with chemo patients, cancer patients with chemotherapy and medications to traumatic brain injury patients.
How long have you been in business?
3 years.
Wow, that is pretty massive growth for just 3 years. Are you feeling on the fast track?
Yeah, we got, especially this year, bundled payments came into play. So clinicians aren't getting paid for the visit, they're paid for the outcome, whether it's good or bad for the patient. And
interesting. Okay.
Yeah, it's really interesting because it's changed the way healthcare works. And so we had early adopters, and it was we were increasing in customers last year significantly, but this year has been quite significant, even more significant. And we've had these two massive partnerships that came in the last month that we're dealing with, which is fantastic. But yes, high growth.
So how do you build a team in this high growth sort of state you're in?
That's a really good question.
I imagine this started with just you, right? Or did you have it? Okay, yeah. So it was just you. How many team members do you currently have?
We have about 10, but we need to expand much more than that.
So how to tell for the listeners who are looking to expand or have suspicion that they're also going to be on a similar track, like what was your first step and first hire? Who did you need?
Yeah, that's a really good question. I needed someone who had a really extensive background in healthcare and did the things that I was not a specialist at, because healthcare is very specialized and you need a lot of knowledge and strategy knowledge around it. And so that was my first hire, someone who was technology strategist, as well as in healthcare. And but it has to be the right person and the right fit. And I was lucky to find exactly the right person for my first hire.
Right. Yeah.
And then we needed to get other things in place, like an artist, and we already had our development team. And then we needed marketing and various other things. So I think a key to hiring is look before you need to hire. So start getting to know people before you actually need to execute, because you'll know them for a length of time and you'll know if they're a good culture fit. And that's so important to us.
I think that's really great advice. We actually have had a few hires recently that are referrals from other people we know, and that has been hugely successful for us. And one of my friends and a business colleague, she sent me an email. She's like, hey, you have to meet this person. I think you two are an awesome fit for each other. And I talked to him like, oh my gosh, like this was like matchmaker style. Like it was a perfect match. So I think that's great advice, like meeting people and thinking about it before you need a person.
Yeah.
That's really good. So this is interesting. So you're selling into, I guess, the clinical side. So occupational therapist, physical therapist, that sort. Are you also selling into hospitals and that sort of thing? Or is it more?
Yes.
Okay. So
it's actually more hospitals at the moment.
Okay, so more hospitals. So you have this B2B arm, but then you also have the B2C arm because you want the patients to be downloading and using the app, right? So this is basically a double-sided marketplace, which advisors tell me don't do, because we're building a platform right now that's also a double-sided marketplace. And I constantly feel like it's this chicken and egg scenario. Like the one side doesn't want to be there until the other side's there, and vice versa. So tell me if you feel the same thing, if your advice would be the same, and kind of how you're navigating that piece.
Yeah, it's such an interesting area, because we started off B2C, and because I had created the app and I thought,
now people need to use it.
Yeah, and they did. That patients downloaded it, but so did doctors, and I was quite surprised. And they were like using it in the office, like, okay, do these exercises this many times a day, or do this, and they could literally have the app or the phone with them to show the patient, instead of running out, getting a piece of paper and writing things down. And so then I thought, well, it would be great if they were connected to their clinician, so the clinician can just prescribe to the patient. So that's how B2B turned out.
Oh, that's interesting. Yeah.
So and then what we did, I'm very passionate about the B2C side, because there's so many people just like me who get paper, and I think they should have something better. Patients deserve better than paper and oral instructions. It's just not thoughtful.
It's 21st century, people. Like, enough with the packet of paper on different colors, the pink and the green and the blue.
Yeah. Yes.
Right.
And so, we put the app out there for free, and we got a lot of downloads, and then we wanted to do some development on that. So if people wanted to ask advice from that consumer area app, they could do that with going to connecting with a clinician in a local area. So we do have this consumer app. It's I think it's about $10 at the moment, and we had this recently a patient download it, and we have many patients download it. Some of them get in touch with us and they say, can we get some help using it? And because they want their prescription in it. And sometimes they'll download another version of it. So we'll send them they'll send us their pieces of paper. We'll send them their prescription, and they are ecstatic. We get the most amazing emails from them. They're like, thank you so much for sending this to me. It has changed the way I do my exercises. I do them all the time. And we can see, and we check in on them, and we're like, this is your compliance. How are you doing? Oh, we have this patient. He's incredible. He had 5 knee surgeries, and and he's been through a lot. And he said, and he's just really down because he's got so much that he's going through.
Yeah.
I thought that he wasn't doing his exercises, but usually he was really on it. So we contacted him and said, hey, we saw that you're not doing your exercises. Are you okay? And he just wrote such a heartfelt email. He was like, thank you so much for checking in.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah. I feel like no one's, I feel really lonely doing this, doing my healthcare, and I can't tell you how much I appreciate you checking in. And
wow.
Yeah. And this is what's going on. Yeah.
And I love that, because a lot of times we think as technology as like, oh, it's just a technology. You know what I mean? But it really changes people and outlook and behavior. And I think that is so fascinating that you're seeing that on your side.
Yeah, it does. It really does change the way it makes people feel connected. People are human, and they want interaction. They want to feel cared for. It is their health care.
Right.
It really has changed and revolutionized the whole way of thinking about the patient as well.
Right. What do you like about being an entrepreneur? What's your favorite part?
I so much. I like learning. Like, I loved your story about how you your strong points and not in staring at the screen, and that's me. But then just getting through that and doing your accounting or doing things that you're not really strong about, and just learning those things is really exciting to me. Pushing yourself because you have to.
Mm-hmm.
It's like do or die, right? So you have to get out and network when you don't want to, or you have to just do things that are beyond your comfort zone, which I love. That really suits my personality. And just the flexibility and knowing that you are creating something out of nothing and truly helping people.
Yeah.
It's a cause.
I think you answered that beautifully, and I can relate to so many of those topics. And I constantly say, so I've been at this for 5 years, but I constantly say I have seen so much personal growth in those 5 years that I don't even know what another 5 years is going to bring, because there's so much pushing the boundaries. There's so much doing things that are totally outside of your comfort zone, like this podcast, like I'm naturally very introverted and shy, and never in a million years did I think we would put a podcast out to the whole world. So there's so much of that. And then I love what you said about creating something from nothing. And that's the inventor piece, and that's the curiosity piece. And I also think that's the legacy piece. There was nothing here, but now there is something, and something that so many people get behind, and that makes such an impact. And I think that is really beautiful and valuable.
Yeah.
Perfect. So as we come to a close, I would love to know, what is the one thing that's sort of on your radar right now that you think we'll all be talking about in a year from now? Like, about it, but it hasn't hit trend or hot topic status just yet, but it will.
We're actually under NDA, so I can't say a lot. But in terms of a trend, I think.
Yeah, go ahead. I would say not necessarily for your company. I think just industry as a whole or something.
I think that it's going to be the patient revolution. That it's the patient's going to be the solution, and people are going to realize that it's not just, I do this to the patient and it's done and my role's over as a clinician. I need to know this. I need to know how they're feeling. I need to know what's going on outside. I need to know why they're doing X, because it has an effect on what I prescribe or how much I prescribe. And I think that really seeing the patient as an actor and involved in their care, and that they will be involved. A lot of people complain that we go to Google. Well, it's because people want more information.
Right.
So that demand by the people is gonna escalate to a point where the organizations and institutions have to address it, and then clinicians are gonna have to accept that this is coming, and they have to do something about it.
I think that is perfect. And I think you're so right. And that's got to be really interesting on the clinician side to see what the patient is or isn't doing. Like, I think that is just so fascinating. I know if I were a clinician, I would be checking in on that all the time. So
yeah,
I think that's,
and it's a matter of life and death in a lot of situations. Like my son died last year because of a medical error. Because they didn't have information.
Right.
So, had they have been concerned about my son and me as more than just a number, I think, and numbers across the board in that moment, and had more information about us, and we had the power to have our own charts and statistics and all of that with us,
right.
I think there would have been a different outcome.
Wow. Well, that is really powerful, and thank you for sharing that. I did not know that piece of your story, but I can see why there's so much passion and energy behind this, and so many people will be so grateful that it exists. So great job to you.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Thank you so much for being here, Naveen.
Thank you for having me.
You're welcome.